All right, guys, so here we are with the last for development. We are going to be talking about social development. This one's going to be a little bit longer than the other ones. So we're just kind of wrapping all this up. We're kind of tying a bow on a lot of the other theorists that look at how we grow and develop and change over time. So let's get after it. So obviously, social development, you are develop, how does your environment, how do other people influence you as you change and grow over time? So we're going to start with a psychologist by the name of Erik Erikson, and we're going to hear about Erikson again a little bit later when we get into personality. So Erikson was a what we would call a neo-Freudian. So he followed he learned quite a bit under Sigmund Freud, but Sigmund Freud, some of his ideas that we've talked about, like all those unconscious drives and what we'll talk about a little bit later, Freud believed that our development and our growth was mainly due to sexual drives and sexual needs. And Erikson's just like, that's crazy, weird, no, that's not what's going on. So Erikson looked at our development as a growth through trials. He believed that development happened throughout a person's life, not only during their childhood, but throughout an entire person's life. And throughout an entire person's life, there are a lot of things that they have to work themselves through. And if it turns out well for them, great. If it turns out not so well for them, well, these are generally things that they struggle with for extended periods of time. So we have a number of stages that we need to go through, and I'm going to kind of plow through these fairly quickly. You're going to need to have a general understanding of each of these stages. You are not going to be expected to be able to really dig deep into each one, but you're going to need to be able to describe each one and understand kind of the basics of each. So let's start at the beginning. And so once again, Erikson is looking at how does society and how does societal needs and our want to fit in influence us throughout our entire life. So the first is trust versus mistrust. Simply put, the first relationships that we build with the people that are around us, mainly our parents. Can we build a sense of trust with those people? Are our needs met during this time? When we are uncomfortable and we cry, are we taken care of? When we are hungry, are we fed? And so over time, we learn to not only trust our caregivers, but to trust, this lays the foundation for people to trust later relationships. And so Erikson would point out, okay, well, you've got a person that really has trouble like letting go, has trouble relying on other people. And he might look back at this first stage and, try to sort out, okay, so what was going on during this trust versus mistrust stage? Was your attachment with your parents not as strong as you would like that to be? So that is stage one, trust versus mistrust. You either, gain that trust and can trust in other people, or it doesn't really work out. So stage two is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So again, you're kind of at this early stage, and I like this. The bottom right-hand picture, I think, is one of the major aspects here, where the child is learning to do their own stuff. They are learning to use the toilet. They are learning to tie their own shoes, to dress themselves. You see kids, who have been, given their own food, like really love ketchup, and you'll see, certain things kids would want everything on because it's the only thing that they have a choice of. Like if you're hungry, you can go downstairs and make yourself whatever, but a kid's got to rely on their parents and whatever they're going to give them. So whatever autonomy they can gain, that is what they're looking for. And so what ends up happening is the child is learning to be independent. And the end result is if they are unable to garnish their independence. I'm sure you have seen adults who, literally just hover over their child, and like their child stumbles, they pick them up, they dust them off immediately. They, make sure to tie their shoes every time, and, they just don't give them a leash to, kind of like get out and do things. You just have a person that not only is doubtful of their own capabilities, but oftentimes is like a little bit ashamed of, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, or I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, get out and get on my own. So that's stage 2. So stage 3 is initiative versus guilt. So you have spent basically your entire life up to this point living with your parents, spending time with your siblings, like that's who you've hung out with. So during stage 3, this is where children are beginning to learn to get out on their own. Can I, when I go to the public playground, can I initiate a conversation with someone else? Can I start playing with other kids? And so are my actions, allowing me to, make these friendships? And in this little one, they talk about a child's virtue. Am I good or bad? Am I making good choices on who I spend my time with? Am I, upsetting my parents? And so if they are able to find that initiative where they found independence earlier, I don't have to rely on my parents all the time, I don't need to rely on my parents to make new friends, are they able to step out and go and do that thing? Otherwise they feel guilt, as if they're kind of stuck in a rut and not able to move forward and do what they should be doing, what other kids are doing. So the next one is industry versus inferiority. So what we start to see is children moving into the school period, into school, moving into elementary. And so what you start to see is, how do I line up with everybody else? How do I compare with other people? Am I competent? Am I able to succeed? And so what we find is children trying to figure out, like, am I the dumb kid in class? Or am I, the smart kid? Where do I lie in comparison to other people? And so what can happen is a child who does really well, they feel industrious, they feel like, hey, like I can do this thing. But if they don't, things start to turn pretty sour. My older brother really fell prey to this industry versus inferiority. He's incredibly smart. He's kind of like he's in like the top 1%. He's done some like tests and stuff. Top 1% of intelligence, but he was dyslexic and he was ADD, so attention deficit disorder. And those two combined to really make it difficult early on to read and to understand what was going on. And while he was really smart, he really struggled in his early school years. And his early teachers did not, they didn't really understand what was going on or catch that he was having these issues, and he had a really rough time. And so the result was that throughout elementary, middle school, high school, college, he really just struggled with school. He's incredibly smart, super intelligent, but because of early struggles, he felt inferior. And so when he went into a school environment, he just really didn't think that he had the chops. He is 34 now, and he graduated in, like last year, at the end of last year. So he graduated college with a bachelor's when he was 33. Which super proud of, but he really had some stumbling blocks. He went into the military and had some time off, but when he first went to college, he dropped out. He couldn't handle it. And a lot of that was because of how these early stages, when he was 6, 7, 8 years old, how much of a core that settled for him on how well he would do at school. So next is identity versus role confusion. So this is you guys right here. This is your adolescence. You are trying to figure out who you are. What are you going to be? What are you going to do? What impact in the world are you going to have? And so during high school, it's, you find some kids that are, a little bit lost or whatever, but what I really like to point out is like college kids. When they go to college, they switch 3 to 4 majors, and they just feel so like frustrated and confused and concerned about like, okay, what the heck am I supposed to do? I thought I was really interested in engineering, but it was really boring. Class is really hard. So I switched over to biology. That was really only because that's what my parents want to do. Now I'm in, psychology, and I don't see any prospects with that unless I get a master's degree. And so people really get confused on who they are as a person, and that's what you're searching for. That is the crisis of your time, and so this crisis is something that you really, you need to figure out who you are. And if you don't, well, you can get caught up in the wrong crowd. You can start doing some stuff that, later on you're just like, oh my gosh, like I'm not interested in this thing. Or being in a relationship that you're just like, this is not grok with who I am as a human being. So next we have stage 6. This is intimacy versus isolation. This is where Mr. Monk is right now. Can I find someone that cares about me, and can I, create relationships that can last for extended periods of time? And so we are looking for, we've been able to make friends, we have lots of them, but now can we find someone that, we can spend the rest of our lives with? Can we find people that really and truly care about us? When I was in high school, I had tons of people that I spent time with. I had lots and lots of friends. But now that I'm older, I have far fewer friends. It's kind of, I would say I have a quarter of the people that I used to spend time with in high school. I spent a quarter of the time. I have a quarter of the amount of friends that I did in high school. And, I would consider myself to have a lot of friends in comparison to some people that I know. We just, your world begins to shrink as you look for the people that really matter, and if you're unable to, oftentimes you feel very, very isolated. So stage 7 is generativity versus stagnation. So your parents are probably starting to work through this, and it's hard for you to imagine because you're not there yet. There's nothing wrong with that. But think about your mom or your dad, and imagine the fact that they've been at whatever job they've been working on for how long? 10, 20, 30? Probably not 40. 40 gets a little bit late, but 10, 20, 30 years, and you're like, man, they've been doing the same thing for how long? Like my dad's a stay-at-home dad and he takes care of the kids. He's been doing that for 20, my older brother's 21 and I'm 15, and so he's been doing it for 20 years. Or my mom's been working at this same job for 20, 30 years. And what ends up happening is people really begin to question, like, what impact have I made? Like, what am I doing with my life? And am I, fulfilling my own goals? Am I doing something in this world? And you see people, they call it the midlife crisis. You see a bunch of, old guys driving, really fast cars, or sleeping around with other people, or blowing money on really dumb stuff. And it's a struggle with where they are. They've been doing the same thing for a long time, and some people just find themselves like, man, I've just been sitting here doing something that I don't love or care about, and not growing or developing in any way, and I feel just super stagnant. Like I'm just doing the same all over and over and over again. So you can see where that can be a real struggle for people. So finally, we have integrity versus despair. And this is kind of the final chapter of a person's life, and it is a simple look back. Did I do enough? Was my life worth living? If I look back, do I generally feel good about the impact that I made, about the choices that I did? Did I explore the world as much as I wanted to? Did I take the chances that I needed to? Did I live life to the fullest? Because my time is coming. You know, I only have so many years left. And so you can very much see two different groups of people in these types of crises. The people that have lived a good life are generally happy. They are genuinely satisfied with where they are and what they're doing. And then you have those that are just angry at everything. They look back on their life and they're just like, oh my gosh, like I want to do all these things and I never did. And you know, these are the old grumpy grandmas and grandpas who are yelling at you to get off their lawn as they look back on their life and realize that I really didn't do a lot. So kind of pulling this all into a bow, Erikson looked at all of these stages of life as crises. Each of these was a specific crisis, something that you had to work through and get over in order to live a better life. And that if you didn't work through some of these stages, if you didn't go through some of these crises in a good way, it oftentimes had really bad implications later on in your life. So there's Erik Erikson. That is his stages of psychosocial development, and let's keep moving. So we're just going to kind of like plow through a couple other of these social theories. So we have Albert Bandura, which we've talked about him a little bit. We talked about his observational learning theory, and this is his social learning theory. It's really the same thing, and it is just saying that people watch what other people are doing. If they're in a good mood, then they are more likely to learn. If they're in a bad mood, they're less likely to learn. And learning doesn't always change a person's behavior. Just because you learn something doesn't mean that it's going to actually change who you are as a person. And so the real crux of this is you got to go back to who Bandura was and looking at how we learn and develop by watching others is, you know, you change based on what you see. And so the people that are around you are a heavy influence to who you are today. You know, you're not going to realize this as much until you get older, but there are so many aspects about you that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I just turned out like exactly like my mom. Oh my gosh, I turned out exactly like my dad. And so much of that is because of how much we are ingrained with what our parents do at an early age just by observing and watching what they are. And so much of that gets kind of ingrained into who we are. So that's a social learning theory. It's fairly simple. It's basically observational learning, but kind of just with a few extra keywords in there. So that's Albert Bandura. So now we're really just kind of like hopping around. We've got a bunch of like random stuff that we need to talk about. So first on the list is Harry Harlow. So Harry Harlow was looking at attachment and how do we develop an attachment with others? So an attachment is just like, what is your relationship with this person? And he was specifically interested in attachment with parents. Now, the way that he did this is that he would take rhesus monkeys and separate them from their mothers, and he would then create these, you can see this on the right-hand side, this terry cloth mother, and then this mother over here with it's a wire, but it had food attached to it. And so based on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we'll talk about later, a person's need, the most basic need is food, or one of the most basic needs is food. And secondary to this, it's kind of like a pyramid. Food is on the bottom. You have to have food in order to step up and go higher. The second part was like comfort and physical contact and things like that. So food is on the bottom and creature comfort goes above that. So you can't pursue creature comfort, like, you know, physical contact, until you get that bottom stage. And so What Harry Harlow found was, as he was studying these rhesus monkeys, is that he expected, the world kind of expected, the hypothesis was that the monkeys would attach themselves to the fake mother that would give them food. However, that is not what he found. He found that the babies would attach themselves to the terry cloth mother and spend the vast majority of the day with them, and then only go over to the wire mother when they needed to eat. And so all Harry Harlow was showing, and this is what you're going to need to know, is that Harry Harlow was showing that with attachment, physical contact is absolutely key. They've done lots of case studies on children who have not, especially orphans, who have not gotten good physical contact at a young age. And the children just don't physically grow. The children are much less likely to, are much more likely to be shorter. They are much less likely to develop cognitively at the same speed as a child that gets lots of hugs and attention. And so Harry Harlow, kind of breaking the mold of how people interpreted what would happen to, or what we felt was more important, really showed that physical contact, really important to how a child attaches themselves or feels about a relationship with their caregiver. So the next time you are holding a baby, whether it's yours or not, give them lots of hugs and kisses. You are literally helping them grow and develop as human beings. So that's Harry Harlow. By the way, all of his studies on rhesus monkeys were terrible. These rhesus monkeys were really messed up, and I guess in the name of science or whatever, but it's pretty sad. Okay, so next we have kind of piggybacking on that, we have Mary Ainsworth and the strange situation. So you have Harry Harlow's his study on attachment, and so what Mary Ainsworth is going to do is going to be like, okay, so we've got our baseline. Now let's take a look at human beings and how they react in a strange situation. So what Mary Ainsworth would do, so this is the study, you need to know about the study, it's called the strange situation, is they would get a mother, they would get a child, and they would put them in a room that was not their house. And she did a bunch of different scenarios where the mom would leave the room, another stranger would come in, and what Mary Ainsworth was studying with the strange situation was the relationship between the child and the mother. How did they react to these different situations? How did they react to whatever was going on? And so the end result was she came up with a number. Okay, so during Mary Ainsworth's studies, when she was taking a look at these different strange situations, she broke down the different attachment styles into 4 categories. She had secure, avoidant, resistant, ambivalent, and disorganized. So secure was the only good one. The other 3 were some type of insecure attachment. So what we have is, the first is a secure attachment, and what Mary Ainsworth would see in the strange situation is that when the mother left, the child was really upset. They would cry, they would be, they would be wailing, but when the mother returned, because they were in this room, it was totally, it wasn't their own house, and so when the mother left, it was a strange situation and the child wasn't happy. But when the mother returned, the child, boom, back, she was fine. They were no longer upset. They were easily calmed down, and they were right back to playing. And this showed a secure attachment. The child trusts the parent. They are upset when they are gone, but they are very happy when they return. Now, the insecure attachments, the 3 different ones. The first we have is avoidant. And so the child and the relationship with the mother often feels like the parent is just not there for the child, that they are not engaged with what is going on. And so what ends up happening is the parent leaves, okay, and then the child is just like, okay, this isn't a big deal. And so when the parent then returns, the child again is not concerned. And so like the parent will pick them up, the child kind of pushes away, like what, like I don't care, you're not normally here. And so them leaving isn't a big deal. So ambivalent or resistant is the parent is often, think of it like a helicopter parent. They're right on top of their child like all the time, and so even while they are right on top of their child, they're the reasoning for their closeness is often kind of in a strange place. And so what then happens is when the child leaves, or where the parent leaves, they really kind of freak out. They're like really upset. And then when the parent returns, the child is not easily calmed down. And you're going to see very similar actions in the disorganized attachment, where the child is just not really sure how to feel. They will look for comfort from other people, which is very strange and not normal to this situation. So those are the different attachment styles. Just make sure that you are able to recognize the differences between the four. Okay, so still talking about attachment, we've got a gentleman by the name of Konrad Lorenz. Literally, you just need to know about Lorenz and you need to know about imprinting. And this is a simple mechanism, a simple evolutionary ability for certain animals to basically the first possible parent, first like moving creature that they see, that's mom, that's dad. You'll see this with like ducks, and so basically what happened with Konrad Lorenz is he got these ducks to imprint themselves onto him. They thought that he was the parent. They acted like ducks and followed him around and did all that. He taught them how to fly. Not by flapping or whatever, but he built a flying machine so that he could fly with them in like V formation. And so you just need to know about Konrad Lorenz. You need to know what imprinting is, and that's literally it. Just a thing that you need to know. Okay, so next we need to talk about Diana Baumrind, and we need to talk about parenting styles. Okay, so simply put, your parents are probably the most influential people in your lives, and the way in which they approach parenting has a major impact on who you are as a person. So we have 4 parenting styles. We have authoritative, we have permissive, we have authoritarian, and we have uninvolved. Okay? Now, this works on a spectrum of responsiveness and demandingness. Okay, so what we are looking at is how much does the parent, as it says, warm up to the child? How much how involved are they in what is going on? How interested are they in what the child is doing? Okay, and demandingness is how much control or how strict or how high are the parents' expectations for the child. Okay, so let's take a look at the healthiest of these parenting styles, and that is authoritative. Authoritative is considered the healthiest of the parenting styles. The parent has high expectations for the child, and with that, they have a lot of support to help them get to that thing. This is the parent that takes their children to all their soccer games. This is the parent that expects their kids to get A's in class, but is like, oh, you have a struggle with that? All right, let's get you a tutor. How can I help you with this? I know a little bit about this. I know a little bit about that. They are very responsive to their children's needs, but they have high demands. They want the child to be successful, and their expectations are high. Okay. Next, we have authoritarian. I'll hop out of the way for this one for a second. So authoritarian is high in demandingness, but not in responsiveness. So this is the spare the rod, spoil the child, and I really like this one right here, the saying, because I said so. When you hear that from your parent, no, can I do this? No. Why? Because I said so. That's an authoritarian viewpoint. There's not a lot of like discussion about like what's going on. This is the way that we are doing it. I have high expectations for you. You have to be at this high level. Well, you just need to figure it out. You know, you just need to experience this and need to know, you know, what you need to do and how you need to do it. Authoritarian parents are often have really harsh disciplines where you know, the child makes a mistake and the discipline comes down really, really hard on that child. So authoritarian parents, really strict, really harsh punishments. Next, we have permissive. Permissive is high in responsiveness but low in demand. So this is kind of the laissez-faire parents, like, hey, you know, go do this thing. You know, but it's not that big of a deal. Yes, you can stay out late, but, you know, when's your next soccer practice? Let me go take you to that thing. So the parents are very accepting of what the child is doing. They want to support that child, but, you know, grades, you know what, just, you know, don't fail. Make sure you come in, you know, before we go to bed at 12 or whatever. And, you know, just not a lot of rules. So that's permissive. And finally, we have uninvolved. And uninvolved is easily the worst, where there is no responsiveness and no demand. The parent is just uninvolved. And the way I like to look at this is that an uninvolved parent always has something else that they put in front of the child. There's always something that is more important than what the child is doing. And so it is considered the least of these parenting styles. Now, with these parenting styles, recognize this, is that your parents go through phases of this. My parents, when they first started out, we came from a very strict Christian background, and they were authoritarian. You know, spare the rod, spoil the child. We got spanked. You know, we were like, they were super, super strict. But as we got older, we moved churches, thank goodness, and they became much more authoritative, a little bit more laid back, still high expectations, but there was much more responsiveness to our needs and much more understanding of what we were going through. And then when I got into high school, my parents became, you know, really permissive. I had already shown that they could trust me as a child. I didn't go out and do stupid stuff. I had really good friends, people that were good, honest people, and we didn't do stupid nonsense. You know, we just kind of played video games and sports. Like, that was our shtick. And so they became permissive. Like, you know, hey, go out. Just let us know when you're, you know, that you're safe. But not too worried about bedtime, not too worried about school. I took care of my grades, didn't really have any issues, and didn't do stupid stuff. And so, you know, oftentimes your parents cycle through. It depends on, you know, my parents were a little bit different with my brother than they were me. They were a little bit different with my sister than they were me. It all just depends on what the situation is. Okay, last thing. And last thing, I promise we'll go through this very quickly. This idea of nature versus nurture. Okay, so this is a major debate within psychology, and I haven't really had a chance to talk about it yet, but it is this simple debate of what has a bigger impact on who you are as a human. Your nature, which is your genetics, your DNA, what your parents passed down to you, or nurture, how your parents raised you, the environment that you are in. What about you, which of these factors plays a larger role in who you are, in your intelligence, in your personality, in the decisions that you make, which has a bigger function or a bigger role in that. And the end result is that they both have a major impact in who you are. You just need to know that this is a discussion and that this is an aspect of your development and you know, how you grow and change. You know, what, you know, both these concepts impact who you are. Okay, so we're done. And I know this has been a really long one, but thank you for bearing with us, and y'all have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time.